Hello, everybody. Welcome to Shadow at Night. This is Tuesday, March the 11th, 2025. On the show tonight, well, there was a pissing contest between Doug Ford and Donald Trump, but not really Donald Trump, more like Donald Trump's representatives and Doug Ford. I'm going to tariff the electric power that we send to the United States. And they do send power to the states. They send it to New York. They send it to Michigan. I believe they send it to Ohio, and it's not really a huge part of the exports that Canada sends down to the United States. It's about 3% maybe, and it doesn't all come from Ontario. Some of it comes from Quebec, some of it comes from British Columbia, some of it comes from Manitoba because it's hydroelectric power, right? So yes, it would affect many, many people. Donald Trump was going to call a national emergency for the areas affected, but then there was kind of a truce, and Trump came out and said today that he respects a very strong man up there. I don't think he named him by name because he probably couldn't remember. But Doug Ford came out, did a press conference today, which was very different than his appearance on CNN last night, and we're going to get to all of that in just a second. The Shadow at Night live stream, as always, is brought to you by CanadaNanoSilver.com. CanadaNanoSilver.com. Here, find out more about them.
Silver is amazing. It has several natural health benefits, and it's been used for hundreds of years for health and healing. That's the main reason they made silverware from silver. But seriously, this nano silver from Silverceuticals is the best and safest silver you can find. There are hundreds of studies and reports on it. I've read some of the studies myself, and it's mind-blowing. One of the things that sets Silverceuticals apart is that it washes out of your body in 24 hours. No silver buildup and no turning blue. And it won't even harm the good bacteria your body needs. It's so effective they can use very small concentrations of silver, like 10 and 32 parts per million, and still outperform other silvers that have up to 3,000 parts per million. It's safer and more effective at the same time. It is an incredibly small particle that is small enough to work through your body, but big enough not to fall out of suspension. They infuse it into almost all of their products. It works in facial serums, toothpaste, gels, and even gummies that work to help your immune system.
No turning blue. That's the big thing. Find out more at CanadaNanoSilver.com, or you can call Kevin and Anna at 204-808-9292. It is CanadaNanoSilver.com. Let me throw this up on the screen here for you guys. Let me take this off first, and let me throw this up now. All right, so there it is. There's most of the products there. Immune gummies, immune support, the naked bandage, the nano silver gel pump, nano silver liquid. You've got the lozenges, you've got the skin cream, you've got the recover muscle cream. All the facial serums are there. The nasal spray. CanadaNanoSilver.com. Again, that is CanadaNanoSilver.com. Hello on Rumble tonight. Cosford is watching. Liv957. Dyson's watching from Winnipeg. Hello, Notable. How are you tonight? Mouth of the South 123 is watching tonight. Rita, hello from Ontario. Hello, DJ 42067 watching in Winnipeg. Goshi 26 is in Toronto watching tonight. World Peace off to Thunder Bay for delivery. You're delivering what? What are you delivering to Thunder Bay? Bright Can News is watching tonight from Guelph. Messiah 854 is watching in Brandon. Roween 30. And Starliner 1961 is watching from Tulum. All right. So is there a sound issue, I'm wondering? Anybody having a sound problem tonight? Because I saw a comment on Rumble that suggested there was a sound problem. Is there a sound problem? Hey, thank you, Suzanne, for that compliment. Nice shirt. I've worn this a lot lately for some reason. I don't know. I hadn't worn it in 2 or 3 years. Then I put it on about a month ago and went, oh, this is comfortable. Sound issue? Sound is good. Thank you, Eddie. All right, let's begin the show tonight with Doug Ford on CNN last night.
A transition in leadership as well. You're about to have a new prime minister, Mark Carney. Yes. Have you spoken to him since he won, and where do you expect him to take this fight?
Well, I spoke to him yesterday. He's a very bright individual. He understands finances like no other person. And we need to sit down, which we will tomorrow. We're going to have breakfast tomorrow morning, and we'll have a strong strategy.
All right, we're going to get to Mark Carney in just a second. I found an old, well, not that old. It's about a 3-year-old article on Mark Carney written for the National Post. And it's kind of scary, actually. I mean, all of the things that we've been hearing about him, and I'm not sure how many of you guys have done a deep dive on Mark Carney, but there's a lot of things to worry about, that's for sure. In case he wins, in case the Liberals win in this coming election, which apparently is going to be called at some point in the next couple of weeks. Hello, Tammy, watching from south of Roblin on Facebook tonight. Trent's watching in Lloydminster, Alberta, not Lloydminster, Saskatchewan, Lloydminster, Alberta. Jeffrey is watching tonight in Elm Creek. Hello, Peter, watching in Lorette on X. Oh, by the way, X is up and running again tonight, and the show should be functioning fine over there. Hello, Gail and Cheryl. Who are you calling the idiot? Doug Ford? Is it Doug Ford you're calling the idiot? Hello, Susan in Scarborough. Ben's Cabin. Ben's Cabin. Sorry, not Cabin. It looks like Ben's Cabin. It's all one word. Ben's Cabin. How you doing? Glow is watching tonight. Self-serving SOB. I guess you're talking about Ford, huh? Jeffrey is watching. Derek. Wow, a lot of bad language in the comments tonight. That's all right. You guys got a vent. It's a good place to do it. This is Doug Ford from this morning. Now, look at the change in demeanor and language.
A little while ago, I had an opportunity to speak to Secretary Lutnick. And Secretary Lutnick has sent out an olive branch to us to come down and immediately meet with him, meet with the whole trade administration, and discuss the future. Rather than waiting till April the 2nd.
Does it look like he's nervous? He looks sweaty to me, out of breath. Then again, he is way overweight, so that could be just a regular thing for him. I don't know. And what's that he's wearing? Is that a painting smock? Did we interrupt his painting session? Does not look like a suit jacket to me whatsoever. He looks maybe a little bit relieved and possibly a little bit scared too. Let's continue.
Threats going back and forth, tit for tat. I've agreed to suspend temporarily, and we always have that tool in our toolkit, until we sit down over the next day or two. I'll be heading down to Washington along with Dominic LeBlanc, and we'll have a good discussion. You know, with any negotiation that we have, there's a point that both parties are heated and the temperature needs to come down. And I thought this was the right decision. They understand how serious we are about the electricity and the tariffs. And rather than going back and forth and having threats to each other, we have both agreed, let cooler heads prevail. We need to sit down and move this forward. This is a massive, massive deal, the USMCA, which the federal government will be leading the charge. I'll be sitting down with all our premiers tomorrow as well and discussing this and their issues as well. So we're going to go down there and we're going to go down there with confidence. We're going to go down there with strength. And again, hopefully we can move this forward. I feel as a province, and I only speak for the province of Ontario, I want to reaffirm I do not speak for any other premiers. Everyone's very patriotic, and we have the best premiers I've ever seen. But we're going to be talking about the USMCA moving forward. The worst thing that could happen is wait and let this drag out until April the 2nd. So we're going to move forward and have a very good conversation with Secretary Lutnick and the whole trade team, as he said, and hopefully we can move this forward because it doesn't benefit anyone, as I told him, no matter if it's the auto sector or any other sector here in Canada and specifically Ontario. And all I mentioned. Assembly lines will shut down in the U.S. and Canada. The stock market is tumbling over $4 trillion. Consumer confidence has went down. I said it's absolute chaos out there right now. We need to move forward jointly. I emphasized how Canadians love Americans, and I know Americans love Canadians, but going back and forth with each other, it just hurts both countries. So I want to thank Secretary Lutnick for reaching out, putting that olive branch. And I've been in business a number of years, a lot of negotiations. And part of the last negotiation, when someone does that, you have to respect that person for putting out that olive branch. And I'm going to make sure we go down there and have a very good but strong and confident conversation.
Yeah. Okay, so when you get down there, if Trump decides he's going to come down and meet you, Doug, he's going to tune you in. First of all, what are you doing going down to the United States? It should be the prime minister, should it not? Wait a minute, we don't really have one right now, or do we have two? We've got a prime minister designate. We've got a prime minister who stuck his tongue out yesterday while taking his House of Commons chair out of the building. Just like the blackface photo from 20 or 30 years previous. Nothing changes with that guy. Doug Ford is going, like Doug Ford is a premier. Yes, he's right in saying that he only represents the province of Ontario. But for goodness sakes, we need national representation here. And Dominique LeBlanc is the finance minister. Yeah. He said the other day, by the way, Dominique said, that he's not very good at math. Can somebody please tell me what it is with these liberals appointing people to the finance position, which is the second highest position in cabinet behind the prime minister, why they continue to appoint people to that position that don't know what they are doing? So here's the article today. It came from the Associated Press. Trump halts doubling of tariffs on Canadian metals after Ontario suspends electricity price hikes. So perhaps, at least for the next 24 hours, the temperature has come down just a little bit. Matter of fact, here is Donald Trump today addressing the media and talking about Doug Ford, even though I don't think he mentions him by name, the Canada situation, and a few other things. And Elon Musk is right next to him. Here you go.
Canada, and I respect very much. As you know, there's a very strong man in Canada who said he was going to charge a surcharge or a tariff on electricity coming into our country. He has called and he said he's not going to do that. Okay, he's not going to do that. And it would have been a very bad thing if he did. And he's not going to do that, so I respect that. But we were just informed that he's not going to do that. Look, we've been treated very unfairly by Canada. We've been treated very unfairly by Mexico. But we've been treated very unfairly by every country all over the world. The European Union is horrible, horrible. And we're going to get it back. And I have a choice. I could just coast, and eventually there'd be a blow-up down the road, maybe a long way. But we owe $36 trillion, and we're going to get it back. We're the biggest, we're the best, and I'm very optimistic. I have to tell you, I'm very optimistic about the country. Much more optimistic this way than if I did it the easy way. Yeah. I could have done it the easy way. I could have coasted. Biden left us a mess. He left us tremendous inflation, tremendously high costs of products. He left us a mess, but he also left us a mess with millions of people that poured into our country that are criminals. Millions of those people happen to be criminals. And we're looking for them all over the place. We're looking for them. And Holman and Christie are doing an incredible job. But he left us a horrible situation, and we're changing it. But one of the things we're changing is we're going to make our country really wealthy again. We're going to bring our jobs back. Right now, we're like a chicken that's being plucked at from all over the world. We're not going to let that happen anymore.
Chicken that's being plucked at from all over the world. You know, somebody put up a great meme today. I can't remember if it was on Instagram or Facebook or X or whichever, but it was Canada is like that buddy who's been sleeping on your couch for 2 years. And when you finally say to him, hey, look, man, maybe it's time to find your own place to live, he gets all pissed off and says, why are you attacking me, man? I'm not doing anything wrong. Now, it was an American that posted that, obviously. But if that's how they see us, and that's the way Trump has been depicting, not just Canada, I guess, but Mexico and the rest of the world, as you just saw in that clip, then yeah, I would say that he's probably got a point. I mean, we've been getting a lot of stuff from the United States gratis for the past 70 or so years now. We've given them some stuff back, but not nearly as much as they've given to us in terms of military protection, especially. I mean, we haven't been able to protect. If the United States dropped all military protection for Canada, just said, nope, you're on your own. Do you think that our forces right now in the area of about 40,000 personnel and maybe some reserves of 5,000 or so, do you think they could protect the borders of this country? No, they could not. They definitely could not. Let's stay with that press conference for a while. Another clip at least, because Donald Trump mentioned, speaking of military, that there is a ceasefire, at least a temporary one, with Ukraine and Russia.
But very importantly, and I said it, Ukraine, ceasefire. Ukraine, ceasefire. Just agreed to a little while ago. Now we have to go to Russia, and hopefully President Putin will agree to that also, and we can get this show on the road. We can get this horrible war where 2,000-3,000 soldiers a week, every week, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 sometimes. I get the reports. And they're not American soldiers. They're Ukrainian and they're Russian. But people are being killed outside of that. People are being killed in the cities as things explode throughout the cities. And we want to get that war over with. So I think it's a very big, I think it's a big difference between the last visit you saw at the Oval Office and this. So that's a total ceasefire. Ukraine has agreed to it, and hopefully Russia will agree to it. We're going to meet with them later on today and tomorrow, and hopefully we'll be able to wipe out a deal. But I think the ceasefire is very important. If we can get Russia to do it, that'll be great. If we can't, we just keep going on and people are going to get killed. Lots of people.
All right, there's Elon Musk with Donald Trump again, which some people find a little bit creepy, including myself, I have to say. Like, why are you always there, Elon? Like, what's going on? Trump can handle himself on his own. And if there's somebody beside him, should it not be J.D. Vance, the vice president? Just seems weird to me that Elon, yes, he is a special employee of the government. He heads up the Doge department. There was a protest, by the way, against Doge today. And I'll play you some video of that a little bit later on in the show. But Musk, dude, I mean, you've got a lot of other stuff going on. You got SpaceX, you got your car company there, Tesla, you got X, which was down for a bit yesterday. I was mentioning this on the show last night because half the show last night did not appear on X. We seem to be functioning okay on X tonight, but Elon Musk gives us a little bit of insight in this clip as to what happened with his platform yesterday.
What happened, but there was a massive cyber attack to try to bring down the X system with IP addresses originating in the Ukraine area.
Oh, well, so that's your suspicion. Is the website, is the internet up? Is it up yet?
It's up, yeah.
It's up yet. Okay, good. But I just was looking.
All right, the attacks on Donald Trump continue in Canada, but from the lesser lights, right? Like Jagmeet Singh, what's the NDP down to in the polls? Not that we care about the polls so much because they've been so virulent lately. They've been everywhere. Virulent, that's not the right word. Volatile, that's what I was going for. They have been incredibly up, incredibly down, depending on who's doing the polling. Don't bother with Ecos or Nanos, I would suggest. Probably Léger is your best bet because they're the ones who have been the most accurate through the last 3 elections at least. Anyway, if we're going to go with polls, let's say the NDP has dropped from where they were about a month and a half ago, which is 19-20%. They're down to 10, and in some polls showing 9. So naturally, Jagmeet Singh and his people are a little bit desperate, and they're throwing anything at the wall, hoping something sticks. And here's Jagmeet Singh saying that, now he said this before, but he was more adamant about it today because Donald Trump is a convicted felon, and he should not be allowed in Canada.
That right now, Donald Trump is a convicted felon. As a convicted felon, as a convicted criminal, he needs an exemption to come into our country. Normally, with dignitaries, and I use the term very loosely when I'm talking about Donald Trump, they would receive an exemption signed by a minister. My commitment is this, that no minister in a new Democrat government would sign an exemption, give Donald Trump special treatment while he's attacking our country, while he's attacking our sovereignty and attacking our workers. My challenge is, will Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre commit to do the same thing? That we will not let a convicted criminal who attacks our sovereignty into our country while those threats continue.
I mean, Donald Trump is the president of the United States, the most powerful country in the world. They always call the president of the United States the leader of the free world. So, yeah, good luck with that, Jagmeet. Good luck with that, Jimmy. Let's see how it works out. But where did he get the idea from? Convicted felon not allowed in the country. Well, isn't Jagmeet Singh not allowed in India, which is where his family is originally from? Here's an article from Global, goes back to March of 2018. It says, Jagmeet Singh now says he accepts that Sikh extremist masterminded Air India bombing. There's video of Jagmeet Singh. I'm not going to play it for you now, but there's video of Jagmeet Singh at a Sikh extremist meeting, it looks like, from 10 or 15 years ago, before he even became an MP or an MPP, for that matter, in Ottawa. Jagmeet Singh declared Thursday, again, this is 5 years ago, that he accepts the findings of the Canadian inquiry into the Air India bombing and condemns all that were behind the horror that killed more than 300 people off the coast of Scotland in '85. So never mind all of this. Let's go down here. Yeah, here. The opinion piece comes as Singh finds himself defending his appearances at a number of other events in recent years, which promoted the idea of Sikh independence, including one in which he's seen sitting quietly beside a Sikh leader in England who says his vision of Sikhism endorses violence as a legitimate source of resistance and survival. Singh needs to do more to denounce such sentiments, said Ujjal Dosanjh, a former federal Liberal health minister, ex-premier of BC, and a Sikh who is a vocal critic of Sikh separatism. Politician standing next to a fascist doing a Nazi salute is expected to speak out. As is a politician standing next to someone who promotes violence in the name of a cause. And he's not allowed in India. Singh, who was born in Canada to Sikh immigrants from the Indian state of Punjab, says his words and actions are informed by the experiences of his family and Sikh history, which is complex and often tragic. That includes the government-ordered military raids on Sikh separatists. This is kind of a longish article. But somewhere in there, I don't want to read the whole thing because it's a waste of good airtime, but he was denied a visa to go into India in 2013, and apparently he is still not allowed there in India. So maybe that's where the idea is coming from for Jagmeet to not allow Donald Trump into Canada for the G7 conference, which is coming up in a couple of months. Here is Mark Carney, our new Prime Minister designate, yesterday afternoon about 5 o'clock Eastern Time.
Just had a long meeting with the Prime Minister. We discussed the most important issues for our country, obviously including Canada and U.S. relations, issues of national security, and yes, the transition between the Prime Minister and myself. That transition will be seamless and it will be quick. Finally, I, as you may have heard, just had a meeting with the caucus. There is tremendous energy in the Liberal caucus. As you saw last evening, this is a united party with full of energy to serve Canadians. C'est pas en ce qui concerne Monsieur le Président Trump, c'est pas le moment. Je ne suis pas encore Premier ministre du Canada, et ça va arriver.
I just wondered about Donald Trump.
Okay, sorry.
What would you say?
First thing, I'm sure he's not going to sign an order directed at me, David, with respect to President Trump. I'm not yet Prime Minister. His interlocutor is Prime Minister Trudeau, and I look forward to the opportunity.
When are you going to be sworn in?
We will. As I said, I just spoke with the Prime Minister at length on issues around the transition. It'll be quick. We'll be coming back to you soon. The good news is that you will be seeing probably more of me than you want, and you will have other opportunities, and we'll be making an announcement on that.
Last question. What did you tell caucus today?
What did I tell caucus today? So this is important. The first thing, I went to caucus today because you start as you mean to go on. And we are a Liberal team, and so it's incredibly important for me to hear directly from the members of caucus the concerns of Canadians on the ground, their priorities. As I said last night, they're the voices of their communities and they're the conscience of the party. There's tremendous energy in that group. We know this is a crucial time for our country. We're united to serve Canadians, and we will build this country.
And we're really proud.
I don't trust this guy as far as I could throw him. More on Carney coming up in just a second. I've got some rather disturbing video to play for you that goes back a couple of years. Also, Tiana Truthseeker's thoughts on this with her latest video. A couple of quick things here to let you know about or remind you of. Helen Gruce, Detective Helen Gruce of the Ottawa Police Service. Her verdict is coming out at some point this week. Hopefully, it could drop at any second. Our friend Dave Freedom is on top of that. Follow Dave on Facebook if you want to get the information the second it comes out. And hopefully, we'll get Detective Gruce on the show at some point after the verdict is arrived at, and possibly her lawyer, Bathsheba Vandenberg, could be coming on. Tamara Leach dropped a post on social media that says their verdict, Tamara and Chris Barber's verdict, will be coming out on April the 3rd. So that's only a few weeks away as well, finally, after all this time, right? Don't forget to like and share whatever platform you happen to be watching on tonight. The Shadow at Night live stream, as always, is streaming live on Facebook, on YouTube again tonight. We're on Twitch, we're on X, we're on Telegram. The Shadow at Night community there. If you haven't joined that group, go ahead. Join Telegram first and then go ahead and join the group. It's easy to find. We're also broadcasting on Rumble and, of course, shadowdavis.com. All right, let's bring this up here. This is disturbing. This is Mark Carney at what appears to be a World Economic Forum or something like the World Economic Forum conference just a couple of years ago.
I would say I see myself as part of the social movement. I think those at the vanguard of the social movement might see me as being farther behind. And I've, absolutely full credit, and I do in the book, to Greta Thunberg, who I've had the pleasure of meeting several times, and who absolutely has catalyzed that movement, the youth movement, and also done something incredibly valuable. And this is embarrassing to admit, but I think we should admit it. And this is often true, by the way, in finance. Very obvious truths are not fully understood in the system. So what she hammered home was the carbon budget, how small it was, how rapidly it was being depleted. And we've moved in a few short years, in part because of her, from a world of ESG, sustainability, broader conversations around, as I say, sustainability, to a relentless focus on net zero. It's called the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero for a reason, because we've moved to the relentless logic of having to get emissions down consistent with the carbon budget. So in that regard, I'm part of that, and part of mapping what people want to, the mechanisms, particularly in finance, in order to deliver it. I'm also, though, conscious that of two other things, Lionel. One is that, of course, net zero it's absolutely essential to stabilize the climate, but that's not the same thing as protecting biodiversity. It's not the same thing as having a just transition along the way. There are lots of other elements that are necessary to this that these broader social movements rightly shine a light on. So,
all right, so don't let him fool you. During his acceptance speech after the Liberal leadership was announced the other night, he said, I'm going to be getting rid of the divisive carbon tax. What he didn't say is that he's going to be replacing it with something worse. Okay, so he is definitely the devil. Somebody was saying the other night on the show that, generally speaking, the higher-ups, World Economic Forum types, Bilderberg types, don't generally send one of their own to run in politics. Usually they send a stooge, and they will rule that stooge from afar, kind of like Justin Trudeau, right? Or Joe Biden, for that matter. It seems as though in this case that Justin Trudeau could not get that job done in Canada. He came close, we have to admit, but he couldn't get the job done. They are sending one of their own to finish the job. This article goes back to June of 2021. It's written by Peter Foster. The Archives. Mark Carney, man of destiny, wants to revolutionize society. Did anybody vote for revolutionizing society? Anybody? Anybody? It won't be pretty. So here is the article. In his book, Values, Building a Better World for All, Mark Carney, former governor of the Bank of Canada, Bank of England, claims that Western society is morally rotten and that it's been corrupted by capitalism, which has brought about a climate emergency that threatens life on Earth. This, he claims, requires rigid controls on personal freedom, industry, and corporate funding. Does that sound familiar at all? Of course it does. Carney's views are important because he is, at this time anyway, UN Special Envoy on Climate Action and Finance. He's also an advisor both to British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, wow, on the next big climate conference in Glasgow, which he was just talking about in that video that we watched, and to Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. And remember, this article goes back almost 4 years. Since the advent of the COVID pandemic, Carney has been front and center in the promotion of a political agenda known as the Great Reset, or the Green New Deal, or Building Back Better. All are predicated on the claim that COVID and its disruption of the global economy provides a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity not just to regulate climate, but to frame a more fair, more diverse, more inclusive, more safe, and more woke world. Carney draws inspiration from, among others, Marx, that's Karl Marx, Engels, Vladimir Lenin, but the agenda he promotes differs from Marxism in two key respects. First, the private sector is not to be expropriated, but made a partner in reshaping the economy and society, and we've seen that happen already. Public-private partnerships, right? Second, it does not make a promise to make the lives of ordinary people better, but worse. Carney's Brave New World will be one of severely constrained choice, less flying, less meat, more inconvenience, and more poverty. Assets will be stranded. Used gasoline-powered cars will be unsellable. Inefficient properties will be unrentable, he promises. The agenda's objectives are, in fact, already being enforced. And again, this goes back almost 4 years, or 3 years, 4 years. Not primarily, but, and this was in the National Post, guys. This is the corporate media. Not primarily by legislation, but by the application of non-governmental, that is non-democratic, pressure on the corporate sector via the ever-expanding dictates of ESG, environmental, social, and corporate governance, and by sustainable finance, which is designed to starve non-compliant companies of funds, thus rendering them, as Carney puts it, climate roadkill. What ESG actually represents is corporate ideological compulsion. It is a key instrument of stakeholder capitalism. Carney's agenda is promoted by the United Nations and other international bureaucracies and a vast and ever-growing array of non-governmental organizations and fora, especially the World Economic Forum, where Carney is a trustee. Also, perhaps most surprisingly, by its corporate victims. No one wants to become climate roadkill. Carney clearly feels himself to be a man of destiny. When I worked at the Bank of England, he writes in Values, his book, I would remind myself each morning of Marcus Aurelius' phrase, arise to do the work of humankind. One is reminded of French aristocrat and social reformer Henri de Saint-Simon, the Grand Seigneur Saint-Culotte, who ordered his valet to wake him with similar words. Remember, Monsieur le Comte, that you have great things to do. What does this guy think? He's anointed or something? That is not the only thing Carney has in common with Saint-Simon, who believed that society should be ruled by savants such as himself, an alliance of engineers and other technocratic intellectuals, along with bankers. Carney is very much a banker technocrat, not merely at ease gliding along the corridors of global bureaucratic power, but expert at framing arguments that support an ever-expanding role for his class. His expanse, I'm just a little guy from the Northwest Territories. I was a hockey goalie. His expansive pretensions first appeared at the Bank of Canada. If the economy is like a game of ice hockey, then central bankers should ideally be like Zamboni drivers whose job is to keep the ice flat. Carney had in fact been a goalie during his academic years at both Harvard and Oxford. At the Bank of Canada, he often seemed like the Zamboni driver who thought he was Wayne Gretzky. He Could never resist lecturing private businesses to stop sitting on dead money or telling them they were too timid in the international arena or advising consumers they were spending too little or borrowing too much. He promoted macro prudence, the idea that regulators, in their panoptic wisdom, would focus on the forest, not the trees. Now he wants to establish himself as an intellectual. Carney has a lot to put straight with the world, according to his book and the related BBC Wreath lectures that Carney delivered last year. The Three Great Crises of Credit, 2008-2009 version, COVID and climate, are all rooted in a single problem. People in general, and markets in particular, are not as wise, moral, or far-seeing as Mark Carney. He sums up this failing as the tragedy of the horizon, a phrase he concocted for a speech ahead of the 2015 Paris Climate Conference. However, Carney is sophistic when it comes to the alleged moral shortcomings of capitalism. It's been one of the most tedious tropes of the left since at least the Communist Manifesto that the rise of commerce would drive out all that is virtuous in society, leaving nothing but the cash nexus of trade. One of Carney's favorite philosophers is Harvard's Michael Sandel, who produces endless trivial examples suggesting that we have moved from a market economy to a market society. Should sex be up for sale? Carney thunders, following Sandel. Should there be a market in the right to have children? Why not auction the right to opt out of military service? Why shouldn't universities sell admission to raise money for worthy causes? But the very fact that people reflexively feel uneasy about or outright reject such notions entirely disproves his point. People do not believe that everything is or should be for sale. Carney notes the long debate going back to classical times on the nature of commercial value that was theoretically resolved by the marginalist revolution, which put paid to the paradox of value that puzzled over the usually low price of useful water and the usually high price of useless diamonds. The marginalists pointed out that commercial value isn't determined by usefulness or labor input. It's inevitably subjective based on personal preference and available resources. There is no paradox. Someone dying of thirst in the middle of the desert might be more than willing to offer a bucket of diamonds for a bucket of water. However, market valuations are essentially different from moral values, a distinction Carney continually muddles. He misrepresents the marginalist subjective perversion or perspective, claiming that it implies that anything not commercially priced is not considered valuable. Market value, he writes, is taken to represent intrinsic value, and if a good or activity is not in the market, it is not valued. But who holds such an idiotic view? Nobody prices their family, children, friends, community spirit, or the beauties of nature, although there is certainly lots of calculation going on in the background. Carney constantly berates market fundamentalist straw men who employ standard economic reasoning and who believe that people are rational and markets perfect. He incorrectly claims that Adam Smith, in his first great book, The Theory of Moral Sentiment, said that a sense of morality was not inherent. In fact, Smith believed that we are born with such a sense, which is then fine-tuned by the society in which we grow up. However, Carney, like all leftists, leans toward the blank slate, nurture over nature perspective, because it suggests that human nature might be beneficially reformed under the right, that is, left, social arrangements. Carney believes our moral sentiment started going astray around the time of the publication of Smith's better-known book, The Wealth of Nations, in 1776, when the Industrial Revolution was beginning to take off. He rightly suggests that one should read both books to gain a full appreciation of Smith's insights, but he seems to have missed the significance of Smith's put-down of whining and melancholy moralists, his cynicism about insidious and crafty politicians, and his thoroughgoing skepticism about those who would trade for the public good, that is, the ESG crowd. Moreover, Smith noted that the greatest corrupter of moral sentiments was not commerce, but faction and fanaticism, that is, politics and religion, which come together in the toxic stew of climate alarmism and ESG. ESG used to be called corporate social responsibility, or CSR. The Nobel economist Milton Friedman warned against its subversive nature 50 years ago. He noted that taking on externally dictated social responsibilities beyond those directly related to a company's business opened the floodgates to endless pressure and interference. The big questions are responsibility to whom and for what? Carney also typically misrepresents Friedman, suggesting that he claimed that shareholders should rank Uber allies and to the exclusion of other legitimate stakeholders such as employees and local communities. Carney claims that at times, large positive gains could accrue to society if small sacrifices were made on behalf of shareholders. But by what right would management sacrifice shareholders, and who would decide which sacrifices should be made? Carney admits that the integrated reporting required by ESG is a morass. ESG ratings consider hundreds of metrics, with many of them qualitative in nature. Putting values to work is hard work, but as with value, it should become easier with sustained practice. No need to ask whose version of values and virtue is to prevail. Despite his thorough castigation of market society, Carney somehow also believes this corroded society is clamoring to make great personal sacrifices for draconian climate actions and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Carney has been a prime pusher of net zero, the notion that climate-related human emissions must be entirely eradicated, buried, or offset by 2050 if the world is to avoid climate Armageddon. He claims that net zero is highly valued by society. In reality, the vast mass of people have no clue what it entails. When Carney talks about this version of society, he is talking about a small, radical element of it. Carney peddles the non sequitur that because the world wasn't ready for COVID, this confirms that the world is being short-sighted about climate catastrophe. But COVID is an obvious reality. An existential climate catastrophe is a hypothesis, frequently promoted, admittedly, with great success by those with agendas. He claims that a good introduction to this subject can be found in journalist David Wallace Wells' The Uninhabitable Earth, a work heavily criticized, even by prominent climate change scientists, for its factual errors and exaggerations. Indeed, even its author admitted its tendacious purpose. Carney also commends the knowledge and wisdom of Swedish teenager Greta Thunberg. The power of Greta Thunberg's message lies in the way she drives home both the cold logic of climate physics and the fundamental unfairness of the climate crisis. Anybody who cites an anxious 17-year-old as an authority on climate science and moral philosophy should be an object of deep suspicion. But then, according to Carney, climate science is easy. Greta's basic calculations are ones that she should easily master and powerfully project. Carney says he once gave Greta a tour of the Bank of England's gold vaults. One wonders if she also offered up tips on monetary policy. But then, in early 2020, Greta demonstrated her complete disconnect from reality when, at the World Economic Forum in Davos, she called for an immediate cessation of emissions which would tank the world economy and potentially kill millions. Even Carney admits deviating from her wisdom on that point. Far from demonstrating a firm knowledge of the climate system himself, Carney cites scary but misleading statistics. Since the 1980s, he writes, the number of registered weather-related loss events has tripled and the inflation-adjusted losses have increased five-fold. Consistent with the accelerated pace of climate change, the cost of weather-related insurance losses has increased eightfold in real terms over the past decade to an annual average of $60 billion. I asked Professor Roger Pilkey Jr., an expert on climate and economics at the University of Colorado, to comment. He replied, Carney has confused economics with weather. The increase in losses he describes is well understood to occur for two main reasons: more wealth and property exposed to loss and better accounting for those losses. To assess trends in extreme weather, one should look at weather data, not economic loss data. Among Mark Carney's current responsibilities since leaving the Bank of England as its governor is advising Justin Trudeau. Carney's confusion is hardly innocent, since his agenda depends on incessantly claiming what had been biblical is becoming commonplace. Fortunately, Carney has been making claims about worsening weather for long enough that we can assess some of his predictions. In his recent book, Unsettled, What Climate Science Tells Us, What It Doesn't, and Why It Matters, Stephen Koonin, former Undersecretary for Science at the Obama-era U.S. Energy Department, cites the speech Carney made to Lloyd's of London before the Paris Climate Conference in 2015. The speech was designed to frighten the insurance industry into divestment from fossil fuels on the basis that many oil and gas reserves would be stranded as we exhaust our allowable carbon budget. Carney pointed out that the previous UK winter had been the wettest since the time of King George III. He went on to say forecasts suggest we can expect at least a further 10% increase in rainfall during future winters. For support, he cited the UK Met Office's forecast for the next 5 years. Turned out to be dead wrong. The 6 winters after 2014 averaged 39% less rainfall than the 2014 record. Meanwhile, a Met Office report in 2018 acknowledged that the largest source of variability in UK extreme rainfalls during the winter months was the North Atlantic oscillation mode of natural variability, not a changing climate. It's surprising, said Coonan, that someone with a PhD in economics and experience with the unpredictability of financial markets and economies as a whole doesn't show a greater respect for the perils of prediction and more caution in depending upon models. During his BBC Reith lectures last year on the topic of how we get what we value, Carney received few challenges from his hand-picked questioners, but a couple came from eminent historian Niall Ferguson. Ferguson asked Carney why. In his discussion of the climate issue, he made no reference to Bjorn Lomborg, a much more knowledgeable Scandinavian than Greta Thunberg, and in particular to Lomborg's book False Alarm, in which Lomborg establishes using official science that there is no existential climate crisis, that adapting to climate change is manageable, and that the kinds of policies promoted by Carney are likely to be far more costly than any impact from extreme weather. Carney, of course, hadn't read that book, but he dismissed Lomborg by saying, it's 15 or 20 years ago when he first came out with his don't worry about the climate. How's that working out for us? But Lomborg never said don't worry about the climate. He just suggested that we had put risks into perspective. Meanwhile, Lomborg's non-alarmist thesis is working out much better than that of doomsayers like Carney. This offhand rejection of someone as widely respected as Lomborg exposes the hypocrisy of Carney's statement in Values, the book, that experts need to listen to all sides. All of us as individuals have a responsibility to be more open, to engage respectively with different views if we want constructive political debates and to make progress on important issues. Except climate catastrophe dissenters don't make it into the debate. There can be zero diversity of views on net zero. Ferguson put another thorny question to Carney at that Reith lecture. He pointed out that since the 2015 Paris Agreement, China had been responsible for almost half the increase in global carbon emissions, and it was building more coal capacity in the current year than existed in the entire United States. What did China's promises of net zero by 2060 mean, Ferguson asked, if it was actually leading the pollution charge? Carney's non-response was that China is the largest manufacturer of zero-emission cars and the leading producer of renewable energy. Coonan notes in his book that Carney is probably the single most influential figure in driving investors and financial institutions around the world to focus on changes in climate and human influences upon it. So it's important to pay close attention to what he says. Mark Carney cries crocodile tears at the possible viability of the Marxist perspective in today's political environment. But if there's one sure sign of a Marxist, it's a belief that capitalism is, or is about to be, in crisis. His new book has an appendix on Marx's theory of surplus value, that all profits are wrung from the hides of labor. He also cites Marx's collaborator, Friedrich Engels. In particular, he notes Engels' pause, the one period in capitalist history early in the 19th century when workers may not have shared the increases in productivity brought about by industrialization. Carney projects that the fourth industrial revolution, a phenomenon much invoked by the World Economic Forum, might bring about a similar period, thus providing a source of political unrest. Could be generations before the gains of the fourth industrial revolution are widely shared, he writes. In the interim, there could be a long period of technological unemployment, sharply rising inequalities, and intensifying social unrest. If this world of surplus labor comes to pass, Marx and Engels could again become relevant. He rather seems to hope so. Carney claims powerful parallels between Marx's time and our own. Substitute platforms for textile mills, machine learning for the steam engine, and Twitter for the telegraph, and current dynamics echo those of that era. Then Karl Marx was scribbling the Communist Manifesto in the reading room of the British Library. Today, radical viral blogs and tweets voice similar outrage. In fact, Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto based on a tract by Engels in Brussels, not at the British Library, but it's more important to remember where Marx's misguided and immutable outrage led: to a disastrous economic and political model that generated poverty and mass murder on an unprecedented scale. Meanwhile, outrage is surely a dubious basis for policy. The outraged are certainly a useful constituency for those seeking power. However, which brings us to the influence of Carney, of the man who first tried to put Marxism into practice. When it comes to the COVID crisis, writes Carney, we're living in Lenin's observation that there are decades when nothing happens and weeks when decades happen. Strange that Carney would cite one of the most ruthless murderers in history for this rather bland insight, but then Carney's agenda is not without its own parallels to Lenin, minus one presumes the precondition of rampant bloodshed. Although Vladimir Lenin didn't know much about business or economics, he declared that communism is Soviet power plus the electrification of the whole country. Carney's plan is global. We need, he claims, to electrify everything and turn electricity generation green. The problem is that wind and solar-powered electricity needs both hefty government subsidies and fossil fuel backup for when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. Green electricity is inflexible, expensive, and disruptive to grids. Carney cites Joseph Schumpeter's concept of creative destruction, but his own version involves not the metaphorical and benign process of market innovation, making old technologies redundant, but a deliberate suppression of viable technologies to make way for less reliable and less economic alternatives. When Lenin wrecked the Russian economy after brutally seizing power in 1917, he was forced to backtrack and allow some private enterprise to prevent people starving. However, he assured his radical comrades that he would retain control of the commanding heights of heavy industry. Carney's plan is to control the global economy by seizing the commanding heights of finance, not by nationalization, but by exerting non-democratic pressure to divest from and stop funding fossil fuels. The private sector is to become a partner in imposing its own bondage. This will be do-it-yourself totalitarianism. Indeed, companies in our one-party ESG state are already pleading like show trial defendants, making suicidal net zero commitments lest banks cut them off. To further that end, Carney has helped to start a key organization, the Network for Greening the Financial System, a collection of central banks and regulators. He's also signed up for an ever-growing constituency of activist policy wonks who peddle emissions measurement and certification, eco-audits, ESG rankings. This agenda is inevitably appealing to transnational organizations such as the International Energy Agency, the IMF, the World Bank, and the OECD, whose empires are all lucratively intertwined with the global government's thrust. In May, the IEA issued a report calling for an immediate end to fossil fuel investment to get to net zero. Part of Carney's strategy is to force voluntary standards on banking and industry, then have governments make those standards compulsory. The major accounting firms appear keen to promote the possibility of endless auditing extensions, under which the relatively straightforward metric of money is to be replaced by the infinitely malleable concepts of purpose and impact. My friends, this goes on and on and on and on and on. But I think we've read enough about what Mark Carney wants to do with Canada and will do with Canada should he be elected as the next prime minister. He's already been appointed to that position, and we have no idea if or when an election is going to be called. We do hear it's going to be called in the next couple of weeks, but that's only hearsay for now. We can't confirm or deny that. What we do know is that political parties are opening campaign offices, wrapping planes and buses, and preparing for a campaign. We hear that the election date could be as early as April 23rd, but again, this is only speculation. In the meantime, the Conservative Party of Canada is now finally releasing attack ads on Mark Carney. I want you to watch this and tell me if you think it's impactful at all.
Trying to explain a bit of how the economy works. One of the
Thank you
issues
so
which
much.
is it may help.
Our economy is stronger than the American economy in the medium term.
Our economy was weak before we got to the point of these threats from President Trump.
I'm trying to explain it.
Okay, but you acknowledge that the consumer
acknowledge.
would pay more at some point.
Well, the consumer is already paying more.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, the consumer is already paying more.
How the economy works.
What the big companies are producing, by and large, are not products that we are consuming. There's some element of that, but by and large, a steel company, how much steel are you using these days, Todd?
I'm trying to explain a bit of how the economy works.
Biggest supplier of semiconductors. We supply almost all their semiconductors. That whole, everybody in the White House is a tech bro except for Trump. They all need semiconductors. They all come from Canada. Maybe they won't.
What do you think? Do you think that ad is at all impactful for anybody thinking about voting for Mark Carney? Anybody? I'm looking at the comments right now. I'm going to go up to Rumble and see what you guys are saying over there. Yeah, you're calling him a liar. I get it. He is a liar. He's a known liar. But are those ads impactful? After that long essay that I just read you regarding what Mark Carney actually intends to do, not just with Canada, but with the world, even though his banking alliance is falling apart because of Donald Trump, Carney is definitely trying to save something of it for a new world order. That's how he sees things. Yeah, this is Randy, Roseanne, Bev. A lot of people are saying that's an incredibly weak commercial. Very, very lame. What I think they should be doing. Hang on, let me play you this one first. This is like 30 seconds. It goes back to the time when Polyev, when he was a bulldog, was grilling Mark Carney in committee. It was during COVID, so it was over Zoom, but watch this.
Do you believe that the Chinese government is perpetrating a genocide on the Uyghur people? Put shareholder profits aside and just focus on humanity. This government is
Look at his delay in responding. Look at the look on his face. We know what the Chinese government has been doing to the Uyghur people, the Muslim Chinese, for years now. They've got them in concentration re-education camps over on the west side of China. 2 million of them, apparently. And they're shipped by train to other work camps in that area. That's what's happening over there with the Uyghur people in China. And when Polyev poses this question to Mark Carney, look at his response. Look at it.
Perpetrating a genocide on the Uyghur people. Put shareholder profits aside and just focus on humanity here for a moment.
I focus on humanity. I spend
so yes or no?
Time focused on humanity, which
yes
is
or no?
dedicated to my.
Yes or
I'm
no?
deeply concerned by the situation and with the.
Yes or no?
Thank you very much, Mr. Polyev. Unfortunately,
shareholders first.
Out of time. All right. So he did not want to say anything to upset the Chinese government because he is in bed with them too. As the World Economic Forum, Bilderberg's China all work together for a new world order. The fourth industrial revolution. Look at this big, huge article here from AA.com. China congratulates Mark Carney for becoming leader of Canada's ruling party. China has always advocated developing relations on the basis of mutual respect, equality, and mutual benefits, as Foreign Ministry spokesperson. All right, our guy's in charge now. You do understand that Canada is completely compromised by the Chinese, mostly, when it comes to foreign interference. And if you want to know more about any of that stuff, I suggest you go and subscribe to Sam Cooper at the Bureau on Substack. We're still trying to get Sam on the show. So, yeah, Mark Carney will absolutely destroy this country. My idea for an attack ad campaign on him, paint him as the devil. Just paint him as the devil, period. Now, the conservatives are probably thinking, well, the average normie's not going to go along with that. They don't know what the World Economic Forum is. They don't know how dedicated Mark Carney is to this net zero climate change agenda. They have no concept of his love for Karl Marx. They don't even know who Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin are. The average Canadian doesn't know. And they won't know because they don't care to know. And these people are going to be allowed to vote. So what we need to do is wake those people up, or at least let them know that this guy is not everything that he claims to be. And furthermore, if Mark Carney is such a change candidate, like he keeps telling everybody, then why does he have the almost exact same cabinet that Justin Trudeau has or had for the last 5 years? He brought Marco Mendicino back yesterday as his chief of staff, for goodness sakes. None of the cabinet ministers who were in positions, their positions before, have been fired or changed out. He's not a change. He's been advising Justin Trudeau for 5 years. And I am certainly hoping, praying that the Conservative Party, perhaps even the People's Party of Canada, can come up with some kind of amazing marketing campaign to make sure this guy never, ever, ever sees an elected light of day as Prime Minister of our country. Here's the latest piece from our friend Tiana Truthseeker regarding Canada. Now, the beginning, you might be going, huh? What's she talking about? But watch it right till the end. It's about 5 minutes.
I don't know what it's like being Canadian. It's basically like living in the Ruby Frankie house. If you don't know who Ruby Frankie is, she was a vlogger on YouTube. She had millions of followers, and now she's in jail. Let me just show you. This is Ruby Frankie. She abused her kids for fame. So Ruby Frankie's entire thing was just to seem like the perfect mom, perfect wife, and perfect family to the outside world. Meanwhile, she was physically, emotionally, and mentally abusing her kids in the back. The dad is now pretending he had absolutely no idea any of this was happening, even though he was there the whole time. And she finally went to jail because the kids ran away from home and said, hey, we need help, even though they've been screaming for help for years. That's exactly what is happening in Canada right now. 40% of Canadians can see that there's an issue, are pointing out problems, are asking for help, and they represent the kids in the family. 60% of Canadians love gaslighting. If you point out any single problem, they take it as a personal attack because their entire programming has been told to make that perfect image of Canada. Like, we're friendly, we're this, we're like naive. Meanwhile, that's all surface level. Most Canadians, 60%, are just backstabbers, crab in the bucket kind of people who would rather vote against their own good just to virtue signal. And that's because they've been programmed that way. It doesn't even matter if you're talking about like politics, if you're talking about work, if you're talking about family related kind of things. A lot of Canadians love gaslighting and pretending like everything's okay when it absolutely isn't. And so it's really hard to actually fix a problem. So a lot of you are like, well, wouldn't us being absorbed by the United States fix all of that? Yeah, but then we're doing a disservice to Americans by inviting 60% of these like unstable, like cuckoo Canadians to just roam around and also vote. Like, they just finally got rid of their crap system down here in the United States, and we're just going to invite 60% of like worse than Democrats in the US Canadians in here. Like, that's not a solution for the US. So if you want to take Alberta, Saskatchewan, Northern BC, absolutely go for it. But like, I honestly think the long-term solution to even Canada not being a country but a corporation is to kick out the monarchy and every province become its own entity. Because you can't really solve a problem when you have 60% of Canadians gaslighting you and telling you there isn't a problem. If there isn't, let them stew in their own garbage and just let them like tank the entire thing, and then don't let them in. Don't let them into anywhere. Just make sure that they stay where they are so that they can swim in their own doo-doo that they have created, because these people are not part of the solution. They're actually part of the problem, and they're keeping the problem going, and their entire mentality is to just show the world how perfect they are because they're too lazy and failed as individuals to actually improve their own lives and improve the state of the country. And that is just programming that is unfortunately the truth in Canada. So if you want long-term solutions, the only solution is to become a republic for every single province, and then people can move to whatever province that they think of politically kind of, resonates with themselves.
Interesting, I've been thinking the same thing. I think I've been mentioning it on the show as well, that each province, each province is its own entity. It is. If you go back to Confederation, that's what it's all about. If each province decided to just say, enough with this Confederation garbage, we're not getting anything out of it, notably Alberta. They should be the first ones to say that, followed closely by Saskatchewan. But could they survive on their own? I mean, yes, of course, Saskatchewan has got the rare earth. Absolutely. They've got the agriculture, not so much in the manufacturing department. Alberta, the oil and gas, obviously. Again, not so much in the manufacturing department. Yes, there is manufacturing that happens there, but not nearly enough to sustain itself or themselves as separate countries. Manitoba, actually, ironically, does have a lot of manufacturing, and we do have a lot of rare earth and some oil and gas, but none of that has been really explored, or not much of it has been really explored because of environmental issues and environmental lobbies and governments being too jelly-spined to stand up against these people. So I would suggest, and Trump knows this as well, he knows how Canada votes. Do you think Donald Trump wants Ontario? No. That's why he's threatening to put tariffs on the auto industry. He doesn't want Ontario. He doesn't want Quebec. He doesn't want the Maritimes. He may in the future, but what he doesn't want to bring a bunch of people into his country who are going to vote Democrat if he wants to truly make the entire country of Canada the 51st state. He'll just take bits and pieces of it, knowing how they vote and knowing what these particular provinces have. That's my opinion. There was a Doge protest today. I want to show you this video. It's hilarious. These government employees, federal government employees in the United States rebelling against Doge, poking around in their business. They don't like that at all because they're lazy. Watch.
Or when you're on your weekend and you get the fork in the road message, or you get the subsequent 5 bullets. Hey, what the hell did you do, you lazy federal worker, this week? How frightening is it that someone on X, the owner of X, speaks to you directly to say, what did you do last week at work? And if you don't answer, I am going to fire you. But even more egregious, the president comes out, the most powerful person in the land, and endorses that message. How do you think that makes federal workers feel?
I think maybe she feels a little bit sick and she's wearing a mask to protect everybody else. Since when is it wrong for the boss to walk up to an employee and say, so what have you been doing? What's going on? How's it going? What have you accomplished in the past week? What is the matter with that? That's what bosses are supposed to do, isn't it? They're trying to find efficiencies in their government. They're trying to save, as Trump said earlier, $36 trillion. And they're doing it with Doge. And they're making sure that people who do work for the federal government are working. That's the bottom line. That's all it is. And these people have become so soft and complacent and self-important that they're holding rallies against actual corporate structure, against the chain of command. It's amazing to me. Why was that woman wearing a mask? Is she still scared of COVID? I wonder how many vaccines she's had. She's going to be very happy about this story. Look at this. From McMaster University, the Faculty of Health Sciences, made at McMaster inhaled COVID-19 vaccine begins phase 2 human trial. Where are they getting these people from? This news came out yesterday. Researchers at McMaster have started a phase 2 clinical trial on a next generation inhaled COVID-19 vaccine. The AeroVac study, supported by $8 million in funding from the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, will test needle-free vaccines developed to provide protection from SARS-CoV-2. Led by Fiona Smallil, and Zhu Jing, members of the Michael G. DeGroote Institute for Infectious Disease Research at McMaster. The multi-center trial will evaluate the new vaccine in a broad study group while also confirming safety, of course. While the current needle-based COVID vaccines have prevented a tremendous amount of death and hospitalization, they haven't really changed a lot of people's experience with getting recurrent infection, says Smallil, a professor in the Department of Pathology and Molecular Medicine. So we're looking to change that by providing robust protection directly at the site of infection. For the new trial, researchers hope to include 350 participants from across Canada at clinical trial sites in Hamilton, Ottawa, Halifax. Those eligible for participation must have at least 3 doses of an mRNA COVID vaccine, have never received the AstraZeneca vaccine, have not had a COVID infection or COVID vaccination within 3 months prior to enrollment, have no diagnosis of lung disease, be available to attend trial visits in person, be between the ages of 18 and 65. You want to be a guinea pig? Go ahead. Oh, I'm doing it for the betterment of society. What's the Newfoundland Premier's first name? The guy who's just announced he's quitting. Andrew? Doesn't matter. Newfoundland Premier Fury from a few years ago talking about those vaccine passports, just as a reminder.
Speaking of vaccinations, I'd like to also take the opportunity today to inform people that we will be moving towards a COVID-19 vaccine passport. A few weeks ago, I asked Minister Hogan, Minister Haggie, and Minister responsible for Services and Health to continue to work towards a vaccine passport. After doing a jurisdictional scan, we have come back with a reasonable alternative for our province, and that is adapting something similar to what's happening in Quebec.
Premier, you've talked about vaccination passports as a way to kind of nudge people to get vaccinated because we need to get our numbers higher. So how much of this, barring unvaccinated people from restaurants, for example, is because it's a health issue, and how much of this is because we just need more people to go and get vaccinated?
Yeah, I think it's a perfect combination of both. It's a behavior modification and nudge, so to speak, in terms of getting a higher uptake. But it's a behavior modification and nudge, so to speak. But overall, as a general principle, the higher the rate of vaccination, the better the public health scenario. So it's not really one or the other. It's both working in concert to achieve a common goal.
Let me put on my mask now. You see, that was one of the biggest things to me, and we talked about this with Brett Sears last night, the guy who got all those P-hack emails we're going to discuss in just a second. Mask on, mask off. Mask on, mask off. Well, I need to speak into the microphone, so I'm going to take my mask off and contaminate the microphone for whoever wants to speak into it next. Then I'm going to put my mask back on and sit here. Like, either wear the mask or don't wear the mask. And that should have told people, everybody, right then and there, that this whole thing was nothing but a pile of BS. Mask on, mask off. But if you took your mask off for a second in Shoppers Drug Mart, now with trans models in the window, you would be attacked. Canadian Tire, attacked. Police, attacked. Wrestled to the ground, handcuffed, arrested, ticketed, charged. You were a villain of society. Amazing. All right, so you recall last night we had Brett Sears on. He's the guy who got the P-hack emails on the FOIA request he made 3.5 years ago. The first bunch is dumped. He's got December 2019. And from the Substack of Dr. Jessica Rose, who's looked at these. She says the TAM emails, and thanks, Brett, for his A-tips. A thick of emails heading our way is the product of Access to Information Act requests made by Brett Sears to have a look-see into Theresa Tam's thinking or lack thereof since the onset of the COVID era. I went through the first 2 of many docs. The first one is 265 pages. The other is 182. Saw a lot of stuff about vaping, some stuff on marijuana, DEI crap, and a tidbit on fighting vaccine hesitancy. First document. The Addressing Vaccine Hesitancy in Ontario proposal, pages 15 through 16, outlines a multi-pronged communication strategy to combat misinformation via school newsletters, websites, and printables. This reflects government interest in controlling narratives to ensure public compliance with health measures like vaccination, crucial during pandemics. Isn't that December 10th, 2019 date interesting, Dr. Rose says? The vaccine hesitancy proposal suggests a standardized website with vaccination schedules, disease explanations, and frequently asked questions managed by public health authorities. The centralized approach could extend to pandemic messaging, consolidating government influence over public behavior. These are from December of 2019. There was no pandemic. Not yet. The proposals focus on integrating sick day policies and hygiene education in Ontario schools. On page 16 shows how governments might use educational systems as control points for health enforcement, a tactic scalable to pandemics. Future goals in the proposal included a digital vaccination record system and a unified Canadian vaccination schedule. Oh, wow. Go follow Dr. Jessica Rose on Substack for more. And while I'm at it, if you have time, inclination, and a little bit of expertise in digging through multiple pages of BS, follow Brett Sears on X. You can find him at Brett1T, Brett_Sears. He's got about 88,000 followers, and he's looking for people to help him out. Each month, he's going to be getting another month's worth of emails, and we need to break all of this stuff down. Already, the bomb has been dropped about those Inuit children being vaccinated with an experimental RSV vaccine without parental consent or knowledge. Do you guys know who Robert David Steele was? Well, according to Wikipedia, Robert David Steele was a former CIA. Let me throw this up on the screen here for you. He was a former American case officer for the CIA, co-founder of the United States Marine Corps intelligence activity, and of course he was a conspiracy theorist. Robert David Steele, who died about 4 years ago, was big into investigating the disappearance of children, and worldwide he held many different inquiries about it. We're going to play some video from Robert David Steele in the extension tonight for All Access Pass holders on shadowdavis.com. If you're not an All Access Pass holder, may I suggest you become one. Go to shadowdavis.com, just like it's spelled at the bottom of the screen, shadowdavis.com, and you put like 10 or 11 bucks down for a month, and you get all the extra content that we do every single night. Also, coming at the beginning of April, I'll be giving away Shadow Davis merch. Finally. People have been bugging me for, 4 years now to get this done. I'm not going to be selling it, at least not for several months, but I will be giving some of it away. We're going to have T-shirts, and we're going to have big old coffee mugs. So that's coming up starting at the beginning of April for All Access Pass holders at shadowdavis.com. The extension begins in 2 minutes' time. For the rest of you, I'll see you tomorrow night at 8 o'clock Central. I love you all. I appreciate you all, and I will see you soon. Bye for now.